regarding police brutality and what's happening in the U.S. about defunding the police, Los Angeles, they took a pretty significant step. Los Angeles City Council moves forward with plan to replace police officers with community-based responders for nonviolent calls. That's good.
It's been a rallying cry since the police killing of George Floyd. Protesters, activists, and some city officials calling for police departments across the U.S. to be defunded. It's painted in huge block letters on city streets from Washington to Wisconsin. But how would it work? Some who support the idea want to strip all police funding and dissolve entire departments.
We don't want no more police.
But other advocates want to reallocate some, but not all, money away from police departments and funnel some of it to training civilians to do some of the jobs police have always done.
We've done an analysis of all the reasons people call 911 and have looked at ways we can shift the response away from armed police officers into a more appropriate response for mental health calls, for some domestic violence calls, for health-related issues.
The cities of Eugene and Springfield, Oregon have a service which does just that. It's called Cahoots. In some instances, instead of police, dispatchers in Eugene and Springfield send out Cahoots teams, 2 civilians in each, a medic and a trained crisis worker, to respond to what they call non-criminal calls.
We can respond for welfare checks. We can check on folks who maybe need some mediation. If there's an argument, we can de-escalate. If someone is in a neighborhood kind of just acting odd, we can just check on them and make sure they don't need anything.
Ebony Morgan says Cahoots helped more than 20,000 people in those situations last year alone with their non-combative, unarmed approach.
I've seen police presence agitate some folks, and they get a little more intense for whatever their experience has been.
So I just want to interject there real quick. Okay, I just want to interject. I really like this approach of replacing them with unarmed responders. Okay, I don't care if they're medics. I don't care if they're social workers. The whole premise needs to be that you're sending people that are there to help, not to escalate, to intimidate, to prosecute, to brutalize, to kill. Do you understand? I mean, just the idea that George Floyd was murdered over a fucking $20 bill is an atrocity. It's a fucking atrocity. I mean, what is the point of that? Why do you need to send people with guns for a $20 bill? That wasn't even fucking forged. He did literally nothing wrong. There is no excuse whatsoever for him to have been killed regardless. But this whole idea that you're sending armed men in blue uniforms to deal with a petty situation like that at a fucking grocery store is obscene. And, you know, this has wider implications. So just before I get into it, I just want to read to you what they did over here in LA. Okay, so Los Angeles City Council on Tuesday unanimously approved a measure to develop an unarmed model of crisis response. Okay, and it would replace police officers with community-based responders for non-violent calls. Good. Okay. Non-violent calls for service that police officers typically respond to include mental health crises, substance abuse, and neighbor disputes. Thank you. That is what I'm talking about. Okay. You have had too many cases where someone is having a mental health episode, whatever it is, could be anxiety, could be something else. It doesn't matter. And the cops show up and they kill him or they brutalize him. You're the wrong fucking person for this job. You need a medic, you need an EMT, you need a doctor, a shrink, someone who knows what the fuck they're doing. Not a firefighter, not a goddamn cop, and not a fucking electrician or a plumber or anyone else. You need someone who's trained in the medical profession for this issue, okay? Or at least, at the very goddamn least, someone who isn't violent and going to escalate the issue and fucking pull out a gun and shoot someone's dog or shoot someone who's having an anxiety attack. This is obscene. And I've seen videos, not just with George Floyd, right? George Floyd wasn't having a mental health issue. It doesn't matter. I saw a video, though, of someone who was having a mental health episode, and he was also, they choked him to death. And when the EMTs arrived, they were pissed. Rightfully so. Like, why the fuck did you kill this guy? What did you kill him for? Are you nuts? So, I think this is something that should be done worldwide. You don't need cops responding to shit like that. Okay? I mean, personally, at this point, I don't think any cops should have any guns. But that doesn't solve the issue, does it? Because they can still go and choke you out and get away with it. So that, this is definitely a step in the right direction. And it does play into defunding the police, right? You're taking that money away and giving it to the right people who will deal with these crises, with these situations effectively, correctly. This is the right step. This is good. And I'm honestly shocked that they managed to get away with this. We'll see if it's to be continued and expanded. But, the LAPD are notoriously, infamously corrupt. One of the most corrupt police departments on the face of the fucking planet. And I can imagine they're not too happy about this. So just something that I want to tell you about real quick. And like I said, this is something that should be done all over the US. It should be done in all countries. You're sending cops to deal with the wrong issue, with the wrong situation, wrong tools for the job. Okay? They don't belong anywhere near that. At least you could argue that in some countries you can maybe come and make the argument, oh, well, at least here they're better trained in de-escalation. But it's not an issue of training. You're not understanding. You also have a very, very long history of racism, genocide, slavery in the United States. And this history needs to be fucking dealt with. It needs to be looked at, studied, taught, so people don't repeat it, so people don't perpetuate it. It is not just confined to the police. Do you understand? This is a systemic pattern of oppression. It goes beyond the police, right? So you have to deal with that anyway. You have to deal with that regardless. And a lot of countries don't, right? Australia, Canada, and the Western former colonial powers as a whole, what they've done, pillaging, raping, and plundering African countries, Southeast Asian countries, Middle Eastern countries, Latin American countries, Central American countries. All this colonial history needs to be looked at, needs to be studied, needs to be taught, not swept under the rug. And these countries, I've told you before, they still maintain these neo-colonial relationships, these same kind of power dynamics with their former colonies. It's disgusting. So you have to deal with this racism issue regardless. And on top of it, yes, you need to defund the cops. And it's really a pragmatic question, right? You're sending the wrong people for the job. And since you don't need them to do that job anymore, give that money to the right people, to medics or social workers or whoever else, right? Just makes sense, man. It's just fiscally responsible, right? That's the term the conservatives like to use. Let's be fiscally responsible. They love that, don't they? There you go.